The microphone unmuted.
All right, we are live. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you live. I'm Trauma Coach Mila, and welcome to our Juneteenth Roundtable discussion, from Jim Crow to mass shootings, how to heal a traumatized community in the era of freedom. I have my brother Will, who is the CEO of Will to Rise, and he's a coach and a consultant. I have my brother EA, who is a jack of all trades, but he's a motivational influencer, and he is a mental health guru in his own right. I have my brother Robert here, and he is an author, a filmmaker, and a speaker. I have my buddy, that's my guy right there, Coach Ron, and he is a relationship coach and just an all-around great person. We got Coach Nisha, and she is also a coach like myself. We have LP, who is he's a medic and a retired firefighter, and he travels around teaching people what to do in situations where there is maybe an active shooter, and we'll get into that later. And so we're going to start with some guidelines and some ground rules. So first thing, we're going to be one mic only. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand unless you're addressed directly. Let's not make this an argument. This is an opportunity for us to come together and speak constructively and start developing a blueprint. So with that being said, we will not argue religion. We will not argue politics. We will not argue anything. If you choose to argue or speak to anyone without respect, you will be removed from the discussion, because this is about love and unity and peace. Also, if you have a question or you would like to address someone, please do a direct message to myself or Coach Nisha, and we will make sure to get your question asked. And if you would like to come on screen to speak, please raise your hand. Everything else, let's just, what they say, Nike, just do it. And so I wanted to say, just thank you all for giving me your morning or part of your morning. It's a beautiful day out where I live in North Carolina, and I hope everyone else is enjoying their day. So in 1964, Malcolm X gave a speech. It was called the Ballot or the Bullet. And there are a few things, this is where we got the by any means necessary statement from. And I want to put that into context as it relates to what we're talking about. Because when he left the Nation of Islam, he was forming a group, a Black nationalist group, with the goal of helping the at that time, he called us Afro-Americans, to expand to a point where we had civil rights and we were not being shot down and lynched and all the things that were going on. And so as I read his speech and the things that he was saying, it made me realize almost 60 years later, not much has changed. So as we celebrate Juneteenth and we think that we're celebrating freedom, is the freedom that we're celebrating really freedom? Because we've had a lot of issues that have occurred since the Civil Rights Act, since we were freed and given the rights that we attempt to enjoy. But for some reason, our skin color is still a threat. So as we come together and have this discussion, I want us to think about, what do we do now? 60 years almost later after the Civil Rights Act was passed, and people are not surviving traffic stops. There's so many videos. We have people driving 4 hours to Black neighborhoods just to shoot people with words like "Here are your reparations" written on their rifle. So let's think about that when we talk. We're going to unpack a lot of things. And as I said, this is about unity. This is about developing a blueprint and how do we come together. And one of the best things that Malcolm X said in this speech was, anyone who cannot put aside their differences for the greater good becomes a traitor to their race. And I'm paraphrasing. So I am going to pose my first question to my brother, Robert. I remember us having a conversation and you were talking about moving in silence. A lot of times we don't understand that everything shouldn't be broadcasted. So I want you to explain from your perspective what it means for us as we grow as a community to just move in silence.
I think, I think even expression of picketing and all of that, I think we've done it, and I believe it doesn't work. What I observed, when you're dealing with the enemy, you got to kind of look how they move. So if you think about the times they blew up the church with 3 little girls in it, they never said anything, never. Think about times that they wanted to hang one of us from a tree. They made plans with themselves, but they traveled, they looked around, and they found somebody that could hang from a tree. Nobody knew. I think we have to get to a place that our actions speak louder than our words. It's to get to a place where, as like like when it's a God say, be gentle as a dove, be wise as a serpent, be gentle as a dove or a snake. What happens is this: when a snake is trying to hunt its prey, it's not making a lot of noise, it's moving very smoothly, it's trying to figure out how to get attacked and get what they need to eat. These people, now I'm gonna say these people, I'm actually really call them, everybody call them colonizers, I'm gonna say pirates. Because they stole, they raped, they murdered, they wasn't colonizers. I hate that word with a passion. But we have to observe, we have to start paying attention how they're moving and moving in the same way. And they don't say much when they do whatever they do. That guy, nobody knew that guy was gonna go in the market and shoot them people up like that, not one person. And maybe they knew, but we didn't, right? When do we get to a place that we stop talking, revealing every move that we're gonna do so they can counteract? Because when you're playing chess, you're out trying to outthink your opponent. So a lot of people tend to, if I'm playing chess, I'm not gonna tell you, oh, I'm getting ready to move my bishop, or I'm getting ready to move my king, or I'm getting ready to move my queen. I'm telling you nothing. And I think we just need to get to a place that we learn to be like they are amongst our own people, sharing, in which we have to be careful and use our spiritual discernment in who to share with and how we're going to move. Because if I find that some of our people for the benefit of whatever, money, whatever, did turned our own people in and did us wrong. You know, there's been a lot of Judases in the camp. And we have to be real strategic. And when I say spiritually discern or having spiritual discernment, is to judge the people that we're interacting with, how they're moving and who they hang with and who they don't hang with. But I think we need to learn to keep our mouths shut and make strategic moves that is beneficial to the community without looking for them to approve it or applaud it or anything of that nature. And that's the best that's the best thought process I have about this. I think we should start moving real quiet, loving each other and moving quiet.
Thank you, Robert. Does anyone else on the panel want to address that question? Please raise your hand, or we can move on to another question.
Can you restate the question?
So, okay, Coach Nisha would like to.
So even though he was talking about moving in silence, unity can still be amongst us, even though we move in silence, like we're moving together as a unit and we're not even connected. I haven't met anyone in person except Coach Mila, right? But the unity that we have and how we're able to come together, that means a lot to each one of us. That's what I think moving in silence really means.
I appreciate that. And that's one of the things that with the advent of technology, we've had the ability to connect with people. You know, Will lives in Canada, you know, and we're all connected because the reality is no matter where we're from, no matter what we look, what our nationality is or our ethnic origins are, other people just see Black skin, right? So we're not as different as we try to make ourselves be. So part of what I see is, as a whole, we are traumatized as a community, as a collective, right? And you cannot learn anything in a traumatized state. You can barely function. And there are 4 types of trauma response. You have the fight, the flight, the freeze, or the fawn. And in my opinion, as a community, we are in the fight response, right? Because we do a lot of fighting. And a lot of times that fighting becomes futile because it doesn't get us anywhere. Sometimes it actually sets us back. So when we can't fight who we want to fight, we start fighting each other. So part of what needs to happen is, you know, laying your differences aside and realizing that we are all we have. You know, you might see New Jack City, you know, when you say Cash Money Brothers, we all we got, you know, but we really are all that we have. And in knowing that we're all that we have to start valuing each other more. I place value on all of you guys. I place value on, you know, on people that look like me, because I know that no one is going to value us above what we value ourselves, right? So when we show people that certain things are okay to do by the way that we treat each other, then why would we expect anyone to treat us any different than we treat each other, right? So when we talk about the community being traumatized and being in a fight response state, EA, as the mental health expert, you know, I want to ask you, what are some of the symptoms or results of us being traumatized and being in a traumatized state and having a fight response?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for allowing me to be on the stage to this capacity. And yeah, I think, you know, some of the downside of things is just, it speaks volumes in our culture. Like, we don't spend money with each other. We find ways to fight and bicker with each other, and we always we don't even seek mental health counseling or counseling whatsoever. And that to me is one of the biggest problems, that one of the biggest challenges that we face in our culture, is not unpacking the trauma that we've been through. Like, everybody under the sound of my voice has experienced trauma to some degree. What the secret to it is learning how to live through it. A lot of us get stuck there in the trauma, and then that's where the fight response come from, because you feel trapped. And, you know, what else would you do but fight when you feel trapped? So what I encourage us, you know, we can talk problem all day, but I'm more into talking a solution, right? The solution is, we need to get in front of a counselor that we relate to and learn how to talk about the traumas and some of the things that we've been through. It's really simple. Unpack, you know, actually, it's real simple. Unlearn and relearn is my strategy for our community. I teach my brothers how to love, how to speak the word love, how to hug, how to just love on each other. And I think this happened generations ago, right? So it's going to take a few generations to actually work on it. So don't be surprised why you see it in the state of where it is now, because we have to do the work. You know, it was a lot of work that went into destroying it. It's going to take a lot of work to get it figured out. So again, thank you for allowing me to share, and I hope that answered the question.
Thank you for that response. Does anyone else have any input based on what my brother EA said? Do raise your hand. If not, we can move on. All right, we got Coach Ron.
Yes, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak on the stage and to be here, a part of this great solution-oriented discussion. My input, I'd like to say to that is, it's a thing, like you said, EA, that we fare, you know, speaking of, we fare, especially men in our communities, we fare to have some type of help, some type of, to overcome those traumas that we have been faced with. And we take it as a weakness. And this is where we become strong. When you release that burden, when you release what is holding you back, you become stronger as an individual, where you can actually implement and help others. And the flight response is like you given an example, but I like to go a little further on that example too, is when you have a rat backed in a corner, the first thing he knows is come up punching. He's not gonna stay there. He doesn't want to be captured. He doesn't want to be hurt. So he's gonna come out fighting. And this is the response that we have, just as you said. In order for us to actually overcome a lot of these things, is for us to actually get in community. It's actually for us to get together and love on each other, like you said, but also to be able to express yourself, to be able to overcome that which is burdening you down. You have to open up and be able to talk. You have to open up and be able to, you know, relieve yourself of the burdens that you've been carrying for many years. And like you said, it's a generational thing. It's it took time to happen, so it's going to take time to overcome. So it's a process. So that's my input, is take the time to go through the process and not give up and not give in, and having for us to, the closest person to you is the one that you fight with the most. So that's my response to that.
The thing about being traumatized on a massive scale also is that there's a science, actually, there's an actual science called epigenetics that explains how trauma in your bloodline impacts how genes express in the future. So, there was a time when we didn't know what to call what we were experiencing, right? Because if you know anything about psychology, we know that the study of mood disorders and mental health disorders did not necessarily include us and our specific struggles, right? Because at the time we were still not even considered human. So some of the things that we see manifesting in the current generation or our own generation are based on things that happened, hundreds of years ago. And so when we say generational trauma, that's a real thing. That's not something that we can deny. That's not something we can set aside. But what we have to remember is it already happened. So we can't stay there. And I said all that to say, fear is a powerful motivator. And a lot of what we do as a community is motivated by fear. When you ask people, well, why can't we do such and such? Oh, well, because they burned this town down. Like a lot of people will reference Tulsa when we start talking about building Black owned and operated towns, right? You'll see people say, well, they burned down, Tulsa, and there's multiple examples of that. But the reality is, at the time that happened, some of the rights that we are able to exercise now, we couldn't exercise then because we were under Jim Crow. So if we keep allowing fear to paralyze our ability to progress because we don't want to see history repeat itself, we're going to stay behind. And so, but that's what trauma does. It paralyzes you. That's the freeze response. And so it's like we do this, like I said, there's 4: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And as a community, we kind of run the spectrum back and forth, and so we have to not be motivated by fear and start moving forward and just do what we need to do without worrying about what someone else is going to do. I see that my brother EA has his hand raised. Is there something that you want to add to that?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to say, as a culture, as a mental health, specialist, I do work with, trauma. I do a lot of trauma work. And what I find in our communities is that people want it now. They want it fixed now. They're broken, they're hurting, and they want results today. They expect to sit down in front of somebody and they expect the results to be there right then and there. And they don't want to do the work. And that's why, I just wanted to say that one last time. We got to do the work. It's the generational work that needs to be done. So if you're expecting to see results in your lifetime, that's some of the problem. It might not be in this lifetime. Martin Luther King is still getting stuff that he wanted, and he was marching in the 60s, okay? So at the end of the night, we got to do the work, and I'm gonna relinquish my mic.
Coach Nisha, you have your hand raised. You would like to pose a question or comment?
Yes, I had a question for Coach Ron. You say that we need to speak up, right? So if I don't speak to a counselor, if I don't feel safe enough to speak to a counselor, because I was raised in a household, what happens here stays here, who else do we have in the community to speak to?
That's a really good question, Coach. A lot of times a lot of times is, the people around you, you can't really trust in the sense of it, because you have been placed in a certain position. And it's hard at times, but if you can find somebody that's trustworthy, that's open to allowing you to be able to express yourself. Yes, it's hard for us to find or even express yourself to the therapy or like you said, in our households, where you're supposed to leave it there. But if you want to break free within yourself, you would know that there is something that you need to say, and then you need to get it out. And you have to find trustworthy individuals around you as well to be able to express that feeling. And it'll take time. It's hard because a lot of times we are placed in a position where we should not speak. We shouldn't say anything. We should just deal with it accordingly. But what good does that do? We have to understand it only damages you more than it damages others around you. Because if you look at it, if you drink the poison and expect somebody else to die, you're the one that's going to be punished. You're the one that's going to die. So if you're holding on to all the resentment and grudges and all the things that you have been through, you're only going to destroy yourself and your generations to come. And if you look at it more in relationship aspect, people go into relationships with past traumas that they have not overcome. And this is where you have a generation of continuous damage in a family, single family homes, in families themselves, and children that carry forward because this is what they know. This has been, as Coach Miller has said, it's a generational in your bloodline. So we have to take the notion of being, just like we have this platform, we have to let people know that there is a safe space to come and have a discussion, to come and be able to speak freely without judgment. And I leave my mic.
I appreciate that, Ron, because the reality is, right, you go from an individual to a family to a neighborhood to a community, right? So in order to heal, we have to start at the individual level, like Brother EA said, do the work, do your work for you, right? And as one person heals, it's almost like a domino effect, right? Because like I myself, as I start healing, then my children, have a more emotionally stable, more functional parent, right? Which means they are not traumatized. And then they go into the world and add value to society versus functioning from a place of, like, a lot of us are working backwards is what I mean, because by the time we reach adulthood, so many things have happened to us that, it takes us a while to kind of hit our stride. And then the way that impacts the community is, think about all the people that when you're traumatized and you're fighting and you're, out basically damaging other people because you're unhealed. That impacts unity, that impacts growth. Like my brother Will, I wanted to ask you, I know you've had some experiences with childhood trauma and things like that. So from your perspective as a man, where should you start when it comes to doing the work and beginning the journey to healing? Because I think a lot of men, especially Black men, kind of feel like they should just, let it rock versus there's something that I can do if I don't want to see a therapist.
That's a great question. And I just want to thank everyone, and you especially, Coach Mila, for bringing us together, and everyone that has spoken so far. I'm learning something new about you, and I appreciate you. And that's a great question. And as a person that were traumatized and that have begun the healing process, I had begun the healing process, meaning that I had to start with myself. But here's the thing, a lot of us wants to begin the process, but yet still in the victim mentality. So you can't be fully doing the work like you should if you're still in the victim mentality. And I posted something earlier today because I'm also furious and just anger. And I say, I'm calling all Black men to stop using the absent father syndrome and to start rising up. This is the first time I'm gonna say this, because most people know that my father passed away when I was 3, but what they don't know is I wasn't raised by my mother either. And I'm gonna leave it at that. So I had to begin the work for myself in order for me to be able to not perpetuating the trauma that I have endured. And we talk so much about the generational wealth, but rarely we talk about the generational trauma, the generational curse. That's why I call myself a cycle breaker, a trauma champion, because I want to make sure that we do not continue. Now, there's a cliche out there, which I want to make sure it's crystal clear that it's not always true that hurt people. Because if that was the case, I would be out there molesting every little boy and sexually abuse women and beating on women, because that's what happened to me. I say it happened to me, but what happened for me is the lesson that I'm now, the experience that I'm now take with me, and to be able to turn my pain into power, to turn my suffering into triumphant. Because I'm going to close with this. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. You can choose to continue to suffer, or you can learn the power from your pain. And then unless you see the purpose in your pain, you will remain painful. So that was a great question. So again, to bring it all in, where does the work begin? It begins with you. And as Martin Luther King said, if you cannot fly, run. If you cannot run, walk. If you cannot walk, crawl. But whatever you do, just keep on pushing, keep on rising up, and keep doing the work. I yield.
Okay, Brother Robert, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, Brother Brooks, appreciate your transparency. I also was molested at a young age. My subconscious, I kind of blocked it out. And one day, I just don't know why, I just felt like something happened. I asked my mother, and she kind of just said, you know what? Yeah, something happened. And the psychiatrist that she must have took me to said that I wouldn't remember, and I did. So thank you for your transparency. But the other part is, if healing is going to begin, self-awareness must be first and foremost. I think a lot of times we don't take the time to recognize the hurt and be honest about it. So healing always begins with honesty. Just be honest about what happened. Even if you don't want to be honest with anyone else, be honest with yourself first, and then begin to seek help. A nice clinical psychiatrist, therapist. I seen a therapist for about 7 years, and worked on myself because I didn't want to take what I went through and put it on someone else, and especially a sister. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to come in being a burden to someone I was going to be in a relationship with. And so I worked on myself 7 years, to the point she's like, I'm going to stop taking your money you're going to be okay. So, you know, so thank you, Brother Brooks. Appreciate you, man. Pray the healing begins for us all.
I appreciate you refer to me as Brother Brooks, but this is Will. But hey, I take Brooks. Hey, he's a smart, good-looking man. So yeah, if I can be Brooks today, just for one day, I'm good. But this is Will, brother. It's all good.
I'm sorry, brother. I'm sorry, my brother.
Hey, Will, you know we all look alike, bro. Don't worry about it.
That's what they say.
You had your hand raised, EA. Did you want to say something about?
Yeah, I did kind of, but I just, you know, I like the way that the conversation was flowing. They both answered it. Like, yeah, it was it became a dead horse. Yes. So I put my hand back down.
Okay, so the thing that I would like to move along to is we live in a time where we see what's going on, right? And so as a mother myself, sometimes I get frustrated. I have 3 sons, 3, right? 10, 7, and 5. And when I look at the state of society, you know, the old, it takes a village to raise a child, right? I was born in 1980. At the time that I was born, the village still existed. For me now, it feels like the village has disappeared, right? And it's like, you know, you get in trouble. And I've said, you guys have heard me say this, as soon as you hit the block, everybody knows you cut up. We looked out for each other, right? So by the time you made it to your house, you done probably got whooped or fussed at about 5 or 6 times, right? Then you still got to deal with mom or grandma or whoever was raising you. So I said all that to say, why do we lack so much? Why do we lack accountability to each other now, right? Because there was a time when we had all things in common. We were accountable to each other. We had no problem with, you know, EA or Will or Ron, you know, disciplining our kids because we knew that it was in love and because they didn't want them to go down the wrong path. But now we have this my for and no more, you know, don't touch my kids, don't talk to my kids. But then when that kid, you know, gets in trouble, now you want us to contribute. Now you want help. But when, you know, we were trying to keep them from, you know, a child's personality is fully formed by the age of 7 when it comes to their brain and their cognition. Brain development does restart or continue, and it kind of ends at 25. But we have to implant these things into our children and drive. That's why the Bible says to train up a child. And so I guess I said all that to say, where did the accountability go? Like, I racked my brain a lot to try to figure out when the switch happened and why it happened. Like, when do we come to a point where we did not want to support each other in the raising and rearing of children and have to live in our community? Because those same ones are the ones perpetuating the crimes against us in our community. So I see, EA, you had raised your hand. Did you want to answer anyone?
My opinion, right? I believe life is all about evolution, right? And everything evolves, right? So back in the day when we had the village theory, you know, that's when, you know, you go to grandma's house and it was, you know, Sunday dinners and stuff like that. That stuff is a thing of the past. And when we lost that, we lost the traditions, right? Even as a parent right now, I live in the neighborhood. I don't know my neighbors. I don't want to know my neighbors because there's a lot of craziness going on in the world. So as the world evolved, so did drugs, and so did mental health. And a lot of people didn't get the help that they needed. So it made us have to go into some sort of isolation. Like, I have to be concerned with my family, and I'm concerned about others of the community, but it definitely starts with my family. And it's hard to be worried about the neighbors when I don't even know, their criminal backgrounds. I don't know if they racist. I don't know if blah, blah, blah. So at the end of the night, it stopped when the tradition of going to grandma's house for Sunday dinner. Once we lost that, we lost a lot. And we're still suffering. But guys, we're doing the work, like doing things like this, building new communities is what I'm focused on doing. I'm not focused on the problem. I'm focused more on the solution. And the solution is finding like-minded people and getting to work. It's really that simple.
Does anyone else want to? Okay, I see Coach Nisha has her.
I like that you brought that up about the neighborhoods and grandma. I didn't really grow up with grandma, so I didn't understand the Sunday dinners. I got that from my mother, and she's still living. But when it comes to like being in neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that I grew up in back in the 80s and 90s, it wasn't safe. So what I did when I lost the community, I moved out and put my children in a different environment. So now I no longer have that community to help with my children. Right? Because now I'm in this different environment and I think they're gonna come and help and protect. No, like you just said, I don't know my neighbors and I don't want to know them. I really don't. Can we do a background check on them? Pretty sure they've probably done one on us, right? So when we moved ourselves out of those neighborhoods just to protect our children and want a different upbringing, I think that had a lot to do with us losing our community and our unity. Because now, I don't want to know anything. But back in the 80s and 90s, I wanted to know my neighbors. I wanted, they cook too, but nobody's cooking. I see people move in and out. I'm not going to say, hey, neighbor. No, I'm pulling in my garage and I'm making sure it's closed. We're not doing Sunday dinners. We're getting together and eating when we can, right? How do we bring that back? Like you said, bringing platforms together like this. And of course, meeting in person, because we need this. Like, kid you not, we need this. It takes the village, and we need to bring that back. I'm not a grandmother yet, but we can still cook. And it don't have to be on Sundays. Now we have the opportunity to create our own tradition. What is it that you like to do? And that's what I'm all about when it comes to my children.
All right. I just want to continue on that segue that Coach Nisha, brought up. I was born in Haiti, and trust me, the village was there because we were exchange food every Sunday. It's just clockwork. We exchange food, and we had to walk miles and miles, and we just love to cook someone else's food. By the way, it was the exact same food that was cooking in my house, but somehow it tastes better. When I left Haiti at a very young age and I moved to Florida to be reunited with my mother after years of separation, I grew up in one of the worst neighborhoods. As a matter of fact, you could not look at somebody's eye because everybody looked so scary, frightened. And imagine a little young boy barely speak English. What are you gonna say to them? And everybody's working 2 or 3 jobs, leaving their kids home in front of the TV. But life had a different plan for me 15 years ago. I had to move out of the country for personal reasons. And now I came to a different country where I had to learn a new language. Now I have my children here. So not only that I have been uprooted from the people that I know, I'm in a different place. How do I build a community when people don't even look like me, don't even speak the same language? As a matter of fact, they look at me as an outsider. And how do we build a community where thanks to technology, we do not have to be far apart to be far apart. We can come together. Now look at us. We're from different backgrounds, different socioeconomics, But guess what? We're showing the next generation that we can get together without cussing, fussing, without pushing each other over the edge, without talking over each other. We can actually listen and having a dialogue where we are building rather than tearing down. We're elevating rather than competing. And this, to me, this is the beginning of a revolution. And if Martin Luther King was here today, oh man, now this is the dream of Martin Luther King. And he's probably rolling over in his grave right now. But we have to understand, we have to come to realization that if we are doing something, don't expect that's going to happen in a lifetime. If you have a dream and you expect to solve that in a lifetime, your dream is not big enough. Go back to the drawing board and think it over again. This is a great conversation. This is probably one of the best days of my life. I yield.
Coach Nisa, I think one of the things about helping with the community, I think, or actually getting that kind of support system, I think now you have to do it a little more different. Mentor programs, things like that, religious communities, things like that. And I'm not suggesting that you put your trust with your kids to all men. God said, put your trust in no man, but just keep your ears to God's mouth and he'll tell you who to trust. So, you know, you can have that kind of support system, but you got to find it in a different way now, I believe. And if you find it, then link, you know, and find people you can trust. God will tell you. He definitely tell you.
I can't hear you, Coach Mila.
Muted myself. I was just talking, right? Apparently I was talking to myself. But in the chat, Temple stated that, you know, asked, did it have anything to do with basically DHS involvement? And there was a time, you know, when children, especially Black children, there was like this mass transition because we would go live, you know, with like for, y'all can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. Excuse me. There were more children of color that went into the foster care system in late 80s, 90s, when the crack epidemic hit the inner city. And, you know, I was one of them. And it's like we watched, I feel like when the village started to disappear because people were afraid to intervene, right? Because then you have teachers making reports, you know, things like that. Not saying if a child was genuinely being abused or hurt that they did not need, you know, some sort of support, but it became almost an insurmountable task for a parent to reclaim or regain custody of their kids, right? And so a lot of people gave up. You know, my mother was one of those people who just decided she didn't want to try. And so we're dealing with a 2 generations almost of people that are now parents or grandparents. I'm a grandmother, I have 2 grandchildren that weren't parented. So there was no blueprint for us on how to do this, right? So when our children became the ones, you know, inflicting the pain on their own community, we don't know what to do with that, right? Because it's like the duality of that's my kid, I love them, but they're dead wrong. And so when I look now, A lot of us, like Nisha said, well, my community wasn't safe, so I left. But when we look back at the communities we left, what do they look like now? Right? We don't go back. It's like sometimes we will look at the people that really had to stay because they couldn't get out or didn't know how to get out. None of us want to be Moses, basically. We don't want to go back and kind of be the one to lead our people out of, or even start the process of rebuilding and reclaiming the community. We'll let it look like a war zone or let it lay in waste and not, when we have businesses, we don't want to put them there. But other races will go and set up businesses in predominantly Black communities, right? And not even respect the residents. They'll take our money, but not respect who we are or our existence, right? Because they don't hire us to work there. A lot of stuff is overpriced. And a lot of times, there was a case way back in the 90s of a young lady named Latasha Harlan who was shot in the back by a store owner. And she didn't do anything per se as far as where she should have had her life taken. I believe she was like 12 and 14 years old. She was young. It's just the harassment that we have to endure when someone sets up a business in our community. And then, we get followed around the store and things like that. And so it's like, why don't we go back? Because the same business that they put there, we could have put there. So why do we have an inherent mistrust of each other where I won't even build a business in my own community? And it's like, I say this, don't complain about a problem that you can fix. At the point when you have an opportunity to fix something and you choose not to, then you lose the right to complain. It's like, a lot of our communities are what you call income tax opportunity zones. So when you go and build, there's a lot of tax breaks, but we don't do the work. That's part of like what EA said, doing the work. We don't do the work to find out what incentives there are for taking, like if I wanted to have a clothing store, for taking that business and helping, rebuild my own community. But then when the community gets gentrified, we have a problem. So, I'm from LA, and we all know about Nipsey Hussle and his buy back the block kind of philosophy and what he was doing. So he's deceased. Who's going to take up the charge? Like, that's where we need to start, is stop allowing our communities to be gentrified. But the only way we can do that, and this is, if you know about the civil rights movement, the third step is where we are now, economic, basically emancipation. And we have not economically emancipated ourselves. You know why? Because we spend $1.6 trillion a year on other people's stuff. And so how do we remedy that? Or what would be the first step to remedying that? And anyone can answer that.
I'm gonna jump in. I think really it starts with the self. Like, we have to build our culture in order for us to trust each other, in order for us to be able to bridge the gap between various businesses. Like right now, the reason why we don't is because we don't trust. Like, the trauma has got us down so in such a rabbit hole that we, I don't trust my brother. I don't trust Will to Rise. I rather trust Barry. You know what I'm saying? Because Barry promised me everything in the world, and Barry's gonna give it to me. But I think Will is just trying to compete with me. Like, we're in competition with each other instead of being, and instead of finding ways to build each other, we find a way to compete with each other. Like, we get mad at each other because one person is doing something that we feel like we can do better. And instead of just joining forces and and giving that person some of your insight, you rather have that person's position. So we first got to start with each other. We got to keep building these communities that we're doing, and we got to do the work. It's going to be a few years, guys. I'm just got my head down. I'm not even looking up to worry about who's booing me or who's clapping for me. I'm that busy doing the work.
Yeah, so that's good, EA. The fact is we have the issue of trust. Trusting in our community, trusting in our brothers and sisters around us, and trusting ourselves. It all stems from ourselves. The trust that we have with ourselves is much, it's not looked at as something that is the word is that is highlighted. We look at the fact that we can't trust other people, but can you trust yourself to do something? Can you trust yourself to move forward? Can you trust yourself to put yourself in a position where you can have change? This is all starts when we start trusting ourselves. We're not necessarily going to put all the trust in the people around us, but we're going to have an open mind and an open heart to be able to do that. This is where we make things move forward. It's been for years that we don't collaborate. We all we do is fight. All we do is compete. This is the issue at hand, that if we can't see, collaboration is a thing that drives things forward. And if we look at other races, they come together to form something to go forward, to build their generation up, to build their communities up, because they see the value in it. They're not looking at self. You see, selfishness is detrimental to us, because we want to achieve something. We want to say, oh, I did this, or I own this. But if you collaborate with someone else, it goes further than yourself. We have to understand and trust that what we are doing when we work together, as we are right now, we're working together in different places, in different countries, because we all have an interest at heart that is bigger than us. We see and know that it's not us that is going to move forward. It's the generation that's coming. You know, there's a saying that the man that plants the seed never gets to sit under the shade, because he didn't plant it for himself. He planted it for the generations to come. So if we can bridge the gap of being collaborative with each other, we can achieve much more, whether it's financial, whether relational, whether it's in our community, whether it's whatever it is that the end goal is. This is what can happen if we open our hearts and mind to understand. Let's move it forward. That's why other businesses come into our communities and set up shop, because we know we can't trust each other. I'm gonna compete with you, or you're gonna steal my customer, or whatever the case may be. And this is where we have to understand we're doing it for the better good of building up our communities. That's why the wealthy go into our low incomes, because they see that they can gain access, that they can gain more wealth, because they're using the people. But we have to spend with each other, and we have to grow these things with each other. So that's what I think is needed more so than anything. We have to trust ourselves to be able to trust others outside, just like we have to build our own home, to build our community, to build the states, to build countries, to build. It starts at home. So let's start at home and then branch out, and then start to collaborate in making more things go forward. I yield the mic.
So does anyone else want to respond to that? I agree with everything that was said, and I believe that that was by design, teaching us to not trust. So there was a time when we had everything common. We can go build towns and create, together, all money in. And that was the point. I think that Nipsey was trying to teach us about all money in. is, if we each had $50,000, I could do a lot with my own money. But imagine if 10 of us had 50, then we have 500,000. We can do so much more with 500,000 collective that will benefit us in the long run than taking our 50 and running, right? That's what we do. Take our 50 and we run. And in a sense, it's understandable, but in another sense, it's like, I was in a discussion and someone was talking about post colonization, something they were talking about, like, and a lot of what we're seeing has something to do with that. And I'm like, no, my inability to choose if I want crab legs right now, and I got a Black owned restaurant that serves crab legs where the girl at the register might have an attitude, but the food is good, and another, business that is not Black owned sells the same thing, equal distant from my house, you know, but I choose to go elsewhere. And because the mistrust, because, oh, well, theirs might not be as clean or whatever in my head that I have formed when I've never been to either. It's like we automatically choose against ourselves, right? But then when we see businesses shut down and like, I'm from Los Angeles. I'm a Cali girl to my soul, bones, marrow, all of that. And after the Rodney King trial and the verdict, I watched my community just burn and it was destroyed. But nobody came back, right? The businesses, everybody took their business elsewhere. And understandably, right? Because we acted a Whole Food was burning stuff and looting and all of that. But the Black owned businesses were the only ones that didn't return. And I never understood for the life of me why they never came back, because a lot of those people were people that I knew from the neighborhood. So I know that they went and opened their business somewhere else. But it's like, we have to have faith in each other to do better. No one is going to be somewhere where they don't feel supported. So we go, there was a video on Instagram where a young lady, her business, a white man came in there and was basically harassing her. And so I don't recall what type of business it was, but he deliberately came into her business just to harass her. And on the one hand, in my head, I was like, what is his problem? But on the other hand, I was like, I wonder if she had put her business in her neighborhood, would she have ever had that issue? Not blaming the victim, but understanding that, sometimes we put ourselves in certain positions and then we want to, buck, we want to fight, we don't know how to be accountable for the fact that sometimes we do things to ourselves, but we complain about them on the same note. And it's like, for me, I'm like, pick a struggle. You're either going to deal with what comes with the choices you make, or you are going to choose to do something else. Those are really the only two options you have. Can't complain about a problem that you have an opportunity to fix. So when we look at our community and the condition that they're in, what are we doing to repair that? Are we waiting for some politician or some government agency to come in and do it? Because 60 years later, we already know that that's not going to happen, right? So at a certain point, we have to decide to reinvest in us. Because, all of us are adults. We're past a certain age. We can, be cool with what we're doing and where we're at, and really just until we die, just be fine. But we have children and grandchildren coming up in this world. And what are we going to leave for them? Teach them how to respect their own community, right? I know my brother LP, as a firefighter and as a medic, I'm pretty sure he's seen a lot related to, what happens in certain communities. And so I want to ask him, over the time that you've been in your field, how has your perspective on our community and what, from the first responders perspective, like the things that you've seen, how do you feel where do you feel we need to start when it comes to reinvesting in ourselves? Because, when we see tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, you understand why people flee. But some people can't. And so I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say, but it's like, for those who can't get out, how do those of us that have, what can we do to go back and prevent, like, the continuous infliction of basically trauma on each other? Do you understand what I'm asking? I don't want it to be too complex or too complex, but I really, want to. You understand what I'm asking, LP? Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Mila. For me, you've heard me say this, and my brother Will Baptiste, my brother Will Kesselman, Mr. EA himself has heard me say this. Mental health crisis is the world's oldest continuous pandemic that's been around since the beginning of mankind, and it ain't going nowhere. I believe, and this is just your brother LP, this is just my opinions based on my experience, professional and personal, that there are three things that keep us, and this is like a set of threes. So the stigmas, the taboos, and the stereotypes. These are the barriers, in my opinion, that keep us from dealing with a lot of the issues that we deal with. Everything falls under mental health. Public health, gun safety, our communities, our educational system, systemic racism, and I'm just talking worldwide, but I can't focus here in the States. Again, the stigmas, the taboos, and the stereotypes. The other thing that I say is everybody experiences trauma. And you've either seen it, received it, or given it. So you've either seen somebody be traumatized or multiple people. And we know, just looking at the news stories, the breaking news, we've all seen trauma happen. You've either received it by a person or more people, or you've given it to one or more people. You got to figure out the other two and how they apply to you, because we've all seen it. For me, as a first responder, I'm a paramedic and a firefighter. I retired in 2020, but my medic license is still active. I've been in EMS and fire since 2006. So it's not too much that I haven't seen. And when I think about why I got into EMS, it was because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be someone who, when I called for 911, I saw somebody that looked like me. I saw somebody that could relate to my emergency, that looked like me. I grew up in impoverished communities in St. Louis, Missouri, my hometown. So when I think about the ailments of our communities, and I'm just talking about Black and browns for right now. When I think about those ailments, physically, emotionally, spiritually, metaphysically, financially, all across the spectrum, I can start from A to Z, get to Z to start over at double A to double Z. We have a lot of crap that affects us. The comment about not wanting to know your neighbors and all those things, I understand it. I see it all the time. I also see the flip side of it. my brother-in-law, one of my brother-in-laws, their whole block, they bought T-shirts, had them printed with the name of their street, and on the back they have their nicknames and they have a number. Not only for the adults, all the kids. They took a group photo of these, of all of them standing facing backwards with the names on their shirts and all this stuff. I was like, wow, I would love to see us do that. I would love to see something like that. So it's not that it doesn't happen anymore. It just doesn't happen in our communities anymore. That's the problem. The grandma having the dinners on Sunday nights, when the grandmas died, they passed the baton to us. We dropped the damn baton. We didn't stick our arm out and say, hey, I'm the anchor here. I'm ready. We didn't do that. I don't know any of my cousins' kids, hardly. I know my cousins, but I don't know their kids. They don't know mine. I can't tell you the last time I've seen. If I walk by every cousin's child of mine right now, I would not even know who they are. They may know me, but I don't know them. That's one of the problems. As a first responder, one of the things that I talk about all the time is all of this active violent incidents. That's what I specialize in. And so when I talk about these things, and most people hear them being referred to as active shooter hostile events, that's going to change. When I say active violent incidents, that covers any mass casualty incident that's involving a firearm, an explosive, or any weapon. You know what happens in most violent incidents, and this is worldwide, not just here in the US. Most crime, violent crime, happens not with, I'll use my props. This is a mock of a Glock. It's plastic, no moving parts, no metal, no ammo, none of that stuff. Most weapons are not used with these, or most crimes are not used with these. They're used with these. Most crimes happen with hands, then a knife, then a firearm. We have to understand that domestic violence is part of the problem. And I don't mean just under your roof and surrounding your four walls. I'm talking about when that shooting happened in Buffalo, when that shooting happened in Houston, when that shooting happened in Uvalde or California, when those incidents happened in the UK or in Canada or whatever, whether they use whatever type of weapon, those are domestic violence incidents because they happen in your hometown. They happen in your country. They happen where you live. And if you don't get a handle on that, it becomes a public health crisis. It becomes a mental health crisis. It becomes a pandemic of epic proportions. Forget about COVID. Mental health crisis is the world's oldest continuous pandemic that's been around since the beginning of mankind. And it ain't going nowhere. You can find it historically. You can find it in religious doctrine. I'm not telling you what I heard. I'm telling you what I know. And as a first responder, my job, or part of my job, is to respond to those emergencies for those that are hurt, injured, dying, or dead. I have to be the eye in the hurricane of your emergency. We have to be the eye in the hurricane of our family's emergencies first. That's where it starts. It starts under your roof and surrounding your four walls. Because if you can resolve, be your family's doctor, be your family's paramedic, be your family's first responder. Because if you don't, then you're gonna call me, or you're gonna call EA, or you're gonna call Coach Mila, or Brother Ron, or Coach Mila, or Brother Robert, or Brother Will K, or Temple, or Brother Curtis. When I got into EMS, you know what I wanted to do? I just wanted to deal with those that were having heart attacks and strokes and low blood sugars and different things like that. Even though I have these certifications, I never ever thought that I would be dealing with all of these mass shooting incidents. I never thought that I would see our communities go or become worse off, especially with the technology that we have, especially with the access that we have, especially with all the knowledge that we have. We all should be PhD levels with the access that we have to information. We all should be better with all the mental health professionals. How many mental health professionals do we just have right here in this panel? We should be good. We should be good. There are 7.8 billion people on this planet. Google it. If you live to be 1 million years old, you would never meet every living human being on this planet. It's 25,000 miles in circumference. But we act like we're alone. All these comments that were made before I started speaking, most people said, I don't want to know my neighbors. I don't want to talk to my neighbors. I don't want to be involved with my neighbors. I don't want to have a relationship with my neighbors. Where are we going? We got to interact with each other. Now, we got to address those problems also. And I know that creates those barriers to interacting with each other. All I'm saying for me is, when I was in medical school, I was trained to treat any human being that was hurt, injured, dying, or dead, not just Black folks. When I went to work at the fire department, I was trained for fire suppression, not for just homeowners not just for the Black homeowners. I'm telling you all, we got to do better, or we're going to continue to have discussions upon discussions upon discussions, and it's not going to be a resolution. And some of you have heard me say, if it's not going to be about solution-based, if we're not going to be talking about putting plans, plural, of action in place, I'd rather sit at home, binge watching something on Netflix and picking the lint out of my belly button than waste my time and yours and the communities. Because what are we doing? It becomes a trauma dump and a bitching fest. LP out.
Do you want us to just jump in, or?
I apologize. My computer was tripping. Brother EA and Sister Temple, I want to take a brief, maybe couple minute just break. Let everybody sip some water. And because we have hit a little bit over the the first hour, excuse me. And so I want to give everybody a moment to kind of, we've had some new people join, and I wanted to kind of, as we say on Clubhouse, do a reset. So if that's okay with everybody, we're gonna get a little music going and take about 3 minutes, 3 to 3 minutes, 5, and then we'll come back to respond to what my big brother LP said, if that works for everybody. So please mute. I just want to thank my boy EA up there for his original music that we've been listening to.
Thank you, sir.
That's not me. I'm
That's
sorry. I
not
can't
you?
take credit.
Oh
No,
man, I
ma'am.
was trying to big you up and everything.
Thank
Wait,
you.
who,
That's not
Just
me.
been,
provided,
you know.
who provided the music?
You said what?
Who provided the music?
We
I think-
are.
I think the director did.
So, anyway, I want to allow Tempo to respond to what Curtis provided the music, apparently. We thank you, Mr. Brooks. Appreciate you. Apparently, I'm Curtis Brooks right now. Yeah, he did. But I want to allow Temple to respond to my brother LP's comment or answer to the question. So I will go ahead and let you say what you have to say, ma'am.
Okay, I am here. Thank you, Coach Mila. And I have been here the whole time. I just wasn't camera ready, but I've been enjoying and appreciating this conversation so much. I've already feel so filled up and inspired. So thank you for allowing me to speak now, because LP always gets me fired up. I am a mental health advocate and peer support counselor for people, not counselor, peer support advocate for people with psychotic disorders. And so I'm in that space as well. When the question was, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? Well, from what I've seen, it's a really important piece is to radically accept where we're at. And I think there's still a lot of groups of people that won't accept or normalize counseling and mental health support as just part of it should be as normal as going to see your MD and getting your cholesterol checked regularly. We should have mental health support as a part of our health plan. And Mila, I'm from California too. And, we had a big group of people that it was really safe to kind of run around and meet up with your aunties and everybody. And it doesn't feel like that anymore. We don't have that community now. And I was just talking to my mom yesterday about how good she had it, that her sisters were close by and her mother-in-law was close by and that everybody was there. But what I realized is that they were all there, but they were all messed up. They all had serious issues, sexual abuse, alcoholism, drug abuse. It was all over the place. They were supportive, but when my auntie would discipline me, that wasn't healthy either. She could whoop me too, that wasn't great. So we do have to have more discernment about how we can build healthier, expanded communities, friends that become family, and being able to trust that your best friend knows how to sit down with your kid and have a conversation that your kid might have been afraid to have with you, I think it just starts with becoming aware as adults of what younger people are going through and not dismissing what their experience are and making it okay. I had teenagers for a long time as a foster parent, and they're very vocal about their feelings. And a lot of times the adults are just like, well, that's just all drama. Okay, but it's their truth, So we're not spending the time to understand. I was a very dramatic teenager, but it was coming from a place of drama. So why not be dramatic about it? It's better to get it out than to withdraw, and then kids are cutting themselves because they can't get it out, you know? And we're not allowed to yell, we're not allowed to scream, you're not allowed to misbehave. I certainly wasn't allowed to misbehave in public. So what kind of space are we giving to people to be able to express healthy anger without it going to the next level of confrontation aggression, confrontation abuse, confrontation violence? I know someone that I can't even begin to raise my voice around before he shuts down and thinks it's immediately going to go to violence because of his past experiences. And I'm saying, hey, I'm just angry. Just the volume turned up. It's not, nothing bad is going to happen, you know? Having an approach as to how we look at anger, I think would be helpful if we started allowing people to have some of their emotions back. We've gone too far the other way, that the only way to feel safe is if we oppress everything, especially in certain cultures, right? And I live in Portland, so there's a very tremendous R&B culture here of Black musicians, and they get all the glory of their talents, but then their neighborhoods are being gentrified and they're running out of places to live. So yeah, of course they're angry. Then we're mad that they're rioting in the streets. Well, they're losing their homes, they're losing their businesses. So we can't take away people's livelihoods and their resources and their connections and their safety and then call them bad for expressing anger. So I just wanted to say that I really support what LP was saying about the epidemic of mental illness. And I've seen firsthand for quite a long time through the mental health community, people being ignored about the seriousness of their mental health, not just in the community, but also, you know, even in the churches and even in the hospitals. So if we don't start radically accepting that people are having very serious consequences going on inside their heads that result in even more serious consequences outside of their bodies, then we're not going to be able to de-escalate all these outbursts that are happening. And when LP said it's a domestic situation because it's happening in my home state, that hit me so purely in the heart that I am responsible for my very own community. That's where I want to start. That's where I've always started. And now I'm in school to be a mental health counselor. So I think we need to, I'm sorry to keep going, but I would love to see an increase in the value of mental health, where the mental health workers are actually making the better money, just like teachers need to make better money, mental health workers need to make better money. And we stop glamorizing that it's only the people that are selling supplements and vitamins and hair products and beauty products that are going to be the millionaires of this world. Much less, I don't even need to be a millionaire, but I do want to live in a nice home, drive a safe car, and have my fridge full and go out for dinner. So I should be able to do that as a servant of my community. But I'm going to go into a job and a career that pays $18 to $20 an hour. But I chose that because my heart wants to do it, not because I want to make money. I already made money. I'm going to land it there. Thank you for letting me talk, Coach Mila.
You brought up a good point. We know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, right? And June is Pride Month. And it was amazing to me, literally at midnight on June 1st, everything switched to Pride. And that is no indictment against the LGBTQIA community. It's the fact that the month before, the one thing that we understand that no matter what color you are, no matter what your sexual orientation, identity, any of that, where you're from, none of that changes the fact that mental illness, mood disorders, and the mental health crisis, like LP said, is going to impact you. So that's the one unifying factor of all of, every month there's something, right? You got Black History Month, and then, Asian and Pacific Islander, Heritage Month, Hispanic. It's like every month there's something that we're celebrating. But then we get the 1 month where the other 11 all have a common thread. And if we don't say anything, there's no big, there's no color ribbon for Mental Health Awareness Month, right? There's no symbol. There's nothing that lets us know that is Mental Health Awareness Month, other than, people like me and you guys kind of saying something in May, like, oh, it's Mental Health Awareness. I challenged myself during that month to post something every day because it matters to me. When you got beauty queens jumping off buildings, right, at 30 years old, when you have the increase in suicidality among Black children under age 12 going up 86%, when we have Black males ages 20 to 24 having the highest rate of suicide right now, when we have the rate of self-medicating and substance abuse that we deal with, that we see in our community, why is it not one of the most important months? Why are there no initiatives? Why are there no, the infrastructure, right? If we're talking about building, why don't we have mental health clinics? Most Black communities don't have community mental health clinics. And so people have to travel very far outside of their community to get any help, right? That impacts a person's desire to even get help. Especially if they don't have a car, that means they gotta hop on a bus, train, whatever, and go however far. And it's gonna take however long for them to go to their 45 to 60-minute appointment once a week. So a lot of times it becomes about the fact that it's too much work. And that's the sad part, because until we can heal people's minds, we can't change their mindset towards themselves, each other, and their community, right? And that's why I talk about, how do we heal a traumatized community? Why aren't we going and doing mental health clinics, open therapy sessions where, we do all this? We give away turkeys, we give away school supplies, but we don't give away therapy. We got to get paid for that. But the fact of the matter is, people need that more. The rates are just astronomical for our community. Is that the mental health crisis that we are in is, and I can only speak for the Black community because I'm a Black person. I don't know what goes on in other communities, so I'm not saying that they don't have the same issues, but I can talk about what I see. And the fact of the matter is, it's like we're almost paralyzed and we're standing still and watching everybody else move around us, and we are the last one to do everything when it comes to attaining things and building things, and so our land is being snatched from us. We're getting pushed out, and it's like we're just watching it happen. And that's the part that blows my mind, because once it has happened, it's like you can't stop that train from moving. Like if we speak about gentrification, I go home to LA and nothing looks the same. They tore down the projects that I grew up in. But when they rebuild, they don't rebuild for us. My family's up in the Bay Area. They're gentrifying West Oakland right now. It's already expensive AF to live up there. But those historical homes are so valuable that they're just being snatched out from under people, and more people are becoming homeless. And so we have this lack of adequate housing, all these things. It's like the snowball. And so it's like, what do we do with that? How do we come together and develop? Then that's really the purpose of the discussion, is to start the blueprint. When you go to build something, the first thing you do is what? You have it, the blueprints drafted of what you want, right? Outline, step by step, room by room, piece by piece. So what is our cornerstone? That's the question I have. What is the cornerstone of rebuilding? If someone was to say, I'll give all of y'all $100 million, if you can tell me what the cornerstone is to build, I'll give you the money to do it. What would you do first?
I can answer. For me,
I think LP had his hand raised first. I want to
Okay.
stay in order. Go ahead.
Go ahead, EA, Mr. EA.
No, sir, brother. I want my brother to go first. I haven't heard you enough. Let's go.
Okay, so I think for me, my answer would be on a number of levels. $100 million. Well, to me, it's not even about the dollar amount particularly. It's about what are we going to do with the money. We have to address a lot of the things in terms of putting a plan of action or plans of action in play with the gentrification. Okay. There is nothing wrong with gentrification in terms of improving the community. The problem is the way that they're going about improving the community. What are you doing with those residents that can't afford those market rate developments, redevelopments, and all that stuff? The redlining and all that stuff. You got to address all of those. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. Not only the murder capital of the U.S., but one of, and sometimes they flip, the most segregated city in the U.S. So I know all about all this stuff or whatever. The gentrification is going on in the Lou. It's bananas, and it's getting ready to get even worse. Now, you got to address those issues, the redlining, the gentrification, and all those things. As you get the communities involved, you got to deal with the politics. People don't want to vote. Somebody's going to fill those seats locally, statewide, and federally. So not voting does not mean that you're not going to, resolve the problem because you don't vote. Because somebody's going to fill those seats. School board meetings, somebody's going to fill those seats. So we need people like us to be involved in our educational system, because again, most of us send our kids to public education. If you can afford private, then you do that. And we tend to go more to those school board meetings when we're paying for our children's education than if they're in a public school. That has to change. When it comes to the religious community, I'll say this. I know a lot of these faith-based initiatives that happened during the Bush era caused a lot of damage to the Black community. The way that they stop addressing issues that were affecting the Black community. We can go on and on and on and on. I would just say that you have to start with the communities one at a time in terms of getting those people involved. You got to deal with the prison complex. You got to deal with the educational system. You got to deal with, it's a broad spectrum that like groups like us can sit down and say, okay, we got to have a committee that's putting plans of action in place, not just freaking talking. You are responsible for the financial. You are responsible for the academic. You're responsible for the political. we got to keep pointing people to put them in these positions to deal with, okay, you're going to get all the information and research for your part. It's almost like having a president and 12 cabinet members. We need these cabinet members to come together collectively with all their expertise, mental health, public health and public safety, EMS and all that stuff. You know, if you have the medical community and you have these different communities coming together with all their expertise and say, hey, based on our research and the information that we have gathered, here's the solution that we see best collectively. We're not going to all see eye to eye, but collectively, democratically, and I'm not talking about politics in terms of Democrat and Republican. I'm just saying democratically, we have come up with these plans to resolve racism, gentrification, education, politics, you know, all of the, you know, the healthcare. As a paramedic, so many people use 911 as their primary care providers. I worked in a community I worked for the largest fire department in St. Louis County. 17 of the 82 municipalities we covered. Most of those were Black and brown, and most of those were impoverished communities. They called 911 like I was their primary care doctor all the time. And so that's a problem, because outside of those communities that were more affluent, the more affluent, the less 911 calls you get. Any community, urban, suburban, rural, the farther out you get, the more resources that those communities have, the less they're calling your brother for their care, the less they're calling for emergencies, the less they're calling for public assistance and public aid. So we know that money cures a lot of our public health ailments. We know that money and the way it's distributed and the way it's shared, quote unquote shared, helps. I will mute my mic for anyone else that wants to speak. LP out.
Oh my God. I love you, LP. I love you. I don't think there's much more to the answer. However, I want to insert, if I was given $100 million in acts to build, and would ask like, what's the cornerstone? The cornerstone is spirituality. We definitely need to find a common ground with our spiritual side of things. I'm not religious. I'm very spiritual though. So we definitely need to find a way to get our community to understand what spirituality means and the purpose of spirituality, because it's become a foreign language, right? They took it out of the schools. When I was growing up, my mom and dad, when they was in school, man, religion was all in. They prayed, they did a lot in school. Now they took all that out. So to me, the cornerstone of our culture and actually building and rebuilding our culture, to me, starts with our spirituality. We gotta find a commonality when it comes to our spiritual side. You know what I mean? So I'm a pass the mic to the next person.
That's a good segue into basically my resident spiritual guru. Keeps me grounded sometimes, you know. Coach Ron, where is God in all of this? We see, I don't like the word religion or religious, right? Because I love Jesus. You know, that's my dude. And a lot of times when we start talking about religion, you automatically, you know, people's energy changes sometimes it just affects their whole like countenance, right? Because a very divisive topic if people don't kind of, like EA said, have a common ground as far as, hey, I love God. All that other stuff sometimes becomes about preference, in my opinion. So I would like to ask you, in your opinion, in everything that we see, and everything that we need, and everything that we know, where is God in all of it?
All right, Coach Miller. Now this is the question that I think we all ask this. We all ask this because we're in certain time of our life, we're in pain, right? When we are going through certain processes, and we want to know, well, God, are you here? I'm not hearing from you. I'm not seeing you do anything. But the reality of it is this: God is there at all times, even good or bad times. And when we look at that, is when bad things happen, and a lot of bad things happen. But I want you to wrap your mind around this. When bad things happen, they're birthed great things to come after, right? If we didn't have the issues that we are facing right now, we would not be here. We will not be discussing these things. These things are painful things. These things are hurtful things. So through that has birthed this conversation, this idea of having, coming up with solutions to these issues that we're having in our communities. But God is always with us, no matter what. And if we look at in the Bible, and I want us to go to, let's see, John 16:33, right? In this world, you will have trouble, trials, and sorrows, right? He stated that in the Bible. We will have trials. We will have sorrows. There's nothing, we cannot get away from that. That's inevitable. But the fact is, he has overcome the world, and our peace is in him that has overcome. So we have to allow ourselves to be engulfed in the word of God, to be able to hear from God, to know that he is there. When we're trying to do things on our own, and we're trying to have solutions on our own, if God is not in it, it will be much more difficult to understand where he is. So we have to put ourselves in the word, understand where God is, because this is where he's speaking to us. A lot of times, we look at prayer. When we go into prayer and we say we pray to God and he's not doing anything, well, are you listening to what he is saying to you after you finish praying? We tend to not listen. We want to communicate with God, but we want to do all the talking. We don't want to hear what he has to say. We don't put ourselves in the position or the word is, we don't put ourselves in a place of silence where we can hear. We put ourselves in a place where we want to talk continuously. Just like we want to have a panel of discussion, we want to be heard. We want to talk. But we're not waiting to hear the solution. We're not waiting to hear when God is going to say, I need you to do this, or I don't need you to do this. And we take it upon ourselves to say, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And when we do get an answer, it's not an answer that we want, because our desires now play into part with that. We don't listen to him direct. When we get that answer, the first thing is that, no, that's not what God is saying for me to do. That's because our idea that we have for that solution to that prayer is not the same as his. Unless you're in line with God, and being in line with God through faith, through his word, it's what gives you the answer. It's what demonstrates God's power. Through all our tragedies in this world, yes, it is hard to accept, but this is part of God put into us, that you need to come to me for your answer, for your direction. God isn't there to say, okay, when you do that or discipline you in any way, you didn't do the right thing I said. No, he's not. He's a loving God. He opened his heart, but he's not going to force himself on you. He's not going to force himself on us. So we have to allow him to talk to us. But the only way to have that is through being silent, through all the chaos and the noise around you, mentally. Outside of that, we have to come to a place where we can be silent. This is where, if you know, many of you probably seen the movie War Room, where you go in your closet. This is where people come up with going in their closet and spending time with God and writing what you're hearing God say. This is where people get their direction. So you have to create a space where you're silent enough to hear God and discern. And the brother Robert said, we have to discern the voice of God so we can discern it from everything else that's coming to us. Because we always have a desire, we always have an idea of what we want. But God is there to tell you what you need. The Bible has every imprint in here is everything that we need. A lot of us don't read it because we don't feel like we understand what it's saying to us. And this is where you need community. This is where you need people that are understanding what the word is saying so you can have, see, where two or more are gathered, God is in it. So once you are discussing the word of God, he is in that flow so you can understand what he is trying to say. And he is there. So if he's there in the midst of that, he is there in the midst of everything. See, when we have all the things that we desire to have, somebody's mic. So we have to understand when we have all the great things that are happening for our life, then we say, oh yeah, thank you, God. Yeah, this is great. God has placed me here. We have all that excitement and joy. But when bad things happen, we're questioning it. Why are we questioning it? He gave it to you. He gave you all these things. Look at the book of Job. Job lost everything in one day. His family, his wealth, his health. But the thing is, he understood that what God was doing wasn't just for himself. It was for those around him. His friends came to him and started asking him, what did you do to cause all of this? His wife told him, why don't you curse God and die? But he never did. Because he understood, God gave me all of this. He can take it away. You can't achieve anything without God. You may say, okay, you might go in, but if you created this, can you create that? We have to understand these different questions that we're asking. Are we putting ourselves in the position to be able to hear from God? So I'll yield. I see someone have their hand up, and I'll yield the mic so we can get that in, and then I'll come back.
Thank you, Coach Ron. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to chime in. I love everything you said. As a minister, one of the things that always make me cringe is when people interchange religion with what I have, and what the God we serve or I serve is about is relationship, not religion. Religion is a set of rituals. It's a set of specifications for a particular group of people. And what God is driving us back to in this season is relationship with him. And so we've had this conversation at my church and with my other ministry friends many, many times about what was the purpose of this pandemic. And the way that it hit the church, I feel, was very intentional, because I agree with the young man that spoke previously about, where's the church? What are we doing? And I think that in a lot of ways, because the church has gotten so caught up in pomp and circumstance, that we've lost our initial mission. And basically what the Bible is telling us to do is to love God and to love people. And so what you really have to look at in that, and even just with us talking about schools and education, because that's my field, is that community institutions like churches and like schools are meant to be collaborative communities. They're meant to be collaborative experiences. And so in my opinion, when you look at an institution like a church, or even at as your local school district, as something that's supposed to feed into you, but it's not reciprocal, you also end up with a problem. One of the things that we as ministers, just to play, the advocate for a second, and churches deal with, is the fact that, there are 4 things that drive people to church. It is divorce, displacement, discomfort, and disillusion. These are the things that drive people to church. But what really happens is, when we are not experiencing those things, we are back to doing us. And so, most of us in the Black church, in the Black community, we have been to Jesus. We have been to that altar 1 or 2 times, for some of us. And when you have already given God permission to do something and to enter your life, despite of your daily or your positional choices that you make with the seasons that you're in your life, you have given him permission to rearrange it. And so when you're experiencing things and you are asking, where is God? He is here. And you have given him permission to redirect your mind, redirect what it is that you're doing, to bring you back to the place that he has already ordained for you. And so I just love the way that you answered that question. And I love to hear what people really think about the church, because if you find a good one that's really concerned about that mission, we want to hear what you have to say about how you feel about church. Is it just religion, or are they giving you an environment where you can cultivate relationship?
Okay, sorry, my computer tripping, and I'll be talking to myself. But I really appreciate what you said, Lamia. And guys, in case you didn't know, Lamia is my best friend, and I brought her into this conversation because a lot of times we operate under the education is the equalizing factor perspective. Before I go there, Coach Ron, did you want to say something else about the religious aspect? Because I don't want to, change the. So if that's what you wanted to talk about, I'll go ahead and let you say what you're going to say, and then I'll start.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree everything with you. What's the name? Lamia. Okay. Yes. So it is a relationship, and we all have to have a relationship with Jesus Christ, with God, because I mean, like you said, it's so interesting how we all go to the altar at the pain points of our life, and then we go back to a regular life when things seems to ease out. And this is where we have the issue, and we always question, where is God? Because we don't allow God. You said it so perfectly. When you gave your life at that altar, you gave permission for him to do what he wants, to shed away, to peel away. He is the potter, you're the clay. So he is going to mold you into that perfect person that he has called you to be. And it's so interesting how a lot of us don't want certain things because that's the desire that we have. But God has a better plan for us. And when things don't go away that we want, we get angry, we get upset, we hold grudges, we resentful, all these different sinful feelings come into play. And I can talk from experience. When I gave my life to Christ and I started talking and speaking and teaching the word, things started rearranging, and my life was like, whoa. That's too much for me. He places you in a place where it can be a desert, a deserted land. And that's hard to accept at times. But guess what? He's perfecting you, because now you are placed him to tell you, this is your mission in life. You're going to go through some hardship. You're going to cry sometimes. You're going to feel pain sometimes. People that are around you are going to go. You're going to leave you. But I'm going to make you better, where the people who are supposed to be in your life, genuinely care for you, is going to come along. and he's going to put them in place for you to move forward into that direction. We're not all here by coincidence. We are all here by God's design. We're in this platform to highlight a lot of different topics, but God strategically did this. We would not be here. I would not be here as a coach if I didn't went through some hardships and turned to Christ. And he started placing me in certain positions. Certain things I get into, I don't even know how I got there. But God is know exactly what he's doing. At times you'll go through a process that's going to be hard. And God is in that process. But like I said, you have to get into the word. You have to listen to what God is saying. It's a dialogue. It's not just for you to keep speaking to him, but you have to stop and listen. And this is where God is. In the midst of everything, God births so much more. It's hard to see. And for Martin Luther King, he went through a process. He was killed. But what came out of that, after that, so much more builds up to these different things. So yes, we may not see certain things in our lifetime. You know, God told Abraham that his seed is gonna fill the world. He didn't see that. He saw his son. And it's filled the world after that. But God's promise still with hope has still been forwarded into this time. So where God is right with us. But we have to allow ourselves to be able to hear what he's saying to us and see what he's doing. And at times you might not see it, but we know that there's something greater that's coming towards. So I yield my mic.
I appreciate that, Ron. What we're gonna do, we're gonna come back to that, but I want to move to education because Black women are among, if not the most educated population in America. We go to school and we get degrees on top of degrees, around degrees and under degrees. My best friend Lamia has about 12 of them. She just be going to school. But
Don't judge me.
I love you. But some statistics that we need to understand. Middle school, which we know some people call it junior high, is the transition between elementary and high school. That time in kids' lives is the most crucial when it comes to their education, right? 86% of Black middle schoolers are functionally illiterate. Why is that? Where is the failure? In the system, in parenting, in both, or in the failure of them to support each other? So when we're talking about education, we know there was a time when we weren't allowed to read, right? It could cost you your life. There was a time when, and there are still some places where schools are just, wasting away. And I just moved here from Vegas, and I love you, best friend, but CCSD is not the best school district ever. When we first moved there from North Dakota, they were literally, my daughters were, one was in 8th grade, one was in 9th grade, and they were 1 year behind. The district was 1 year behind where my daughters already were when we moved there. And they got frustrated because they were like, Mom, we did all of this last year. And so I said all that to say, when we talk about education being a factor in us being able to progress or being a springboard for forward movement and evolution of our community, how do we fix the issues that we still have? I keep saying 60 years later after the Civil Rights Act was passed, no more segregation, no more any of that. Where is the failure in educating our children, because our Black males are lagging so far behind the females that it is sad. And again, I have 3 Black sons. I'm going to address that to Lamia because, you know, she got 1,000 degrees in education.
Thank you, Mila. So I want to give you guys just a little tiny, I don't want to eat up time because I really want to hear what you have to say, but I want to give you guys a little bit of education on exactly where you left off, Shamila, when you were talking about after Brown versus Board of Education. And as we know, with many of the things that were enacted in laws about to desegregate society, they put in fail safes so that they could follow the law, but still have what they would describe as the natural order of things. And so your school district, and I always wondered this, and one of my degrees is in educational research. And so what I discovered was that when schools were desegregated, what they basically did in most school districts around America is that they went into backdoor offices and with a map. And so with that map, they drew circles around neighborhoods. And so here in Nevada, our Black schools are in a district called Prime 6. The money is allocated based on the median income of the neighborhood. The thinking behind that is those who are in impoverished neighborhoods most likely cannot handle, and this was the verbiage used on the document, sophisticated and expensive technology and different things within their schools. And so within your local school district, there are sub-districts, there are regions. The money that is allocated in the schools in the Black region is always significantly lower. And the reason that is because the money is all coming from the state. And so they have allocated funds for this particular region. Here in Vegas is called the West Side, right? So the money on the West Side from the state is education is split amongst all of the social service programs that are in that area, all of the family services, welfare. And so they have a certain amount of money that is allocated towards our neighborhood, towards our community, but we have to share because they need so many other things besides just amazing schools, right? You mentioned middle school, and this is what the issue is with middle school. Developmentally, middle school, the age and your brain development in middle school is starting to gear towards independent thinking. Here in Nevada, it is the research, and I stand behind this research. I fight people about this research all the time, that if you are not reading on grade level by 3rd grade, statistically, you will be below and under where you're supposed to be for the entirety of your school career, K through 12. Because there's a transition that happens between 3rd grade and beyond, because from kindergarten to 3rd grade, pre-K to 3rd grade, you're learning to read. From 3rd grade on, you're reading to learn. And so if you don't have the comprehension skills and the decoding skills by 3rd grade, at this point, all of your Common Core curriculum, all of your state required learning objectives are based on the fact that you can read a text and decipher meaning and apply it to that particular subject. If you can't read, it's just like she said, functionally illiterate by the 3rd grade, we should hold our kids back. And as a community, we don't believe in that. We believe that it's always racially motivated. A lot of things that happen with our Black boys is they misdiagnose behavior problems for learning disabilities. And so we get to this point where we as parents know that what you're saying is crap, right? My child is a disruption. My child don't want to learn. I know that's not true, but I also haven't looked into any educational testing to see if something else is wrong. And so what we will do is when that teacher tells you that they need to be held back, or that teacher's telling you that they don't have the stuff down, we equivocate the fact that you don't like my child, with what you're saying about them academically. No, what you're saying about them academically is true, but the way you're dealing with it is disrespectful to my child. And so the biggest problem and the challenge that I always ask parents who come to me and say, you know, this school district, I ask them this question: when was the last time you communicated with your child's teacher that wasn't about a behavior problem? When was the last time you communicated with your child's educational system when there wasn't something wrong? I said it earlier that it's supposed to be a collaborative experience. And so we have to be more involved in what our children are learning. It's not just, I'm going to send you somewhere for 6 hours and they need to do their job. Everything that we teach, the way that teaching is structured, I'm a constructivist, and that particular learning theory states that children derive meaning from what they're learning in school based on their environment. And so if I am trying to teach you math, but you are in an impoverished situation, the mathematical concepts are harder for you to understand because you have had less experience in working with numbers in real life. The numbers in your life when you lived in a situation where you are impoverished is about deficit. And so those children who live in that type of environment typically have issues with multiplication, addition, and algebra, and they do better, believe it or not, with subtraction because they are used to living in an environment where there is not enough of something. And so concepts where you need to carry, for example, because I have more than enough, people don't really think about it like that, but socially, those social concepts are very tied to mathematical concepts. And so you end up with a situation where they have no frame of reference and they have no way to construct meaning to a lot of the things that they're being required to ask. I saw somebody had a question for me, so I'll yield the mic.
Yes, Temple had a question for you.
Yeah, I was trying to type it out, Lamia, but I was one finger in it, so it was taking me a minute. Well, 2 parts. First of all, I was a foster parent for teenage girls, and I saw exactly what you're saying, that girls came to me and they were in 7th grade failing. And I said, you know, in the teachers' meetings, how did she get here? How did she get this far? And I would ask the girls, how did you get to the next grade when you were failing 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade? And they go, I don't know. They just passed me along. They said it's not going to matter till I get to high school. So that was a huge awakening that the focus is really on, you know, what they produce in high school is what is going to be their, you know, future. So they're kind of just moving them along, hoping that at some point something's going to shift for them and they're going to click in. But in saying that, my question is that I haven't been in high school for over 35 years, but I want to ask you a question. Do you know if the high school education has shifted their focus at all about the, you know, the essential living skills that kids need to be able to move into independent adulthood, as far as how do they save money? How do they balance their checkbooks? How do they, you know, do we talk about investments? What do you do when you have an unexpected pregnancy? Like, there wasn't any of that when I was in high school, and I don't know if it's changed because I've been out of it for a long time. But when I was in high school, there was only just more math, more English, more science, and it was everything that we'd already been talking about since 4th grade. Do you have any feedback on that?
I do, and that's such a wonderful question. So a little bit about me personally. My sons, both of my sons have learning disability. I have one that is on the autism spectrum, and I have another who is dyslexic and has dyscalculia, which is only something that they've only recently discovered, which is basically the same thing as dyslexia, but he has a hard time making sense of numbers. And so what I noticed is for my son who is in the autism program, he's very well adjusted. He's in general ed for 80% of his day. We made the decision to be a single income family so that one of us at all times could walk him through his educational journey. But what I did notice is that for him and his program, and kids who have learning disabilities, they shift the curriculum to include real life stuff. So here in Nevada, math, when I was in school, it was pre-algebra, algebra, geometry, calculus. So now that middle math is now called personal math, personal finance. And so it's the same concepts, except it is geared towards things that you're going to do. So some of the curriculum was, how to manage your budget, how they did a whole unit on your monthly expenses. So they gave them an amount. This is how much you have. This is how much your apartment costs. It was almost kind of like a Monopoly situation where they would give you different scenarios that would either add or take away from your money, and you had to make decisions. As far as the language arts, I don't see a lot of things that they are doing. I can tell you in high school, they do not depend and teach writing anymore the way that we learned it. And so our kids, and this is part of the reason why we have so much civil unrest on our high school campuses right now, but with in conjunction with mental health deficiencies, but we have that issue because we know no other way to express ourselves in distaste for the way that our environment is set up, except we're to physically act out. They don't write. And so those writing skills also lead to language skills. And so what we find is that kids are not able to articulate themselves when they get out of high school to get jobs, to do college interviews, to do any of the things they need to promote themselves. There's a deficiency there. And so depending on your school district, depending on principals have a lot of say in that, administrators have a lot of say in that. And what I do and can say is that schools that are in areas where the kids are disadvantaged either by race, by class, by socioeconomic status, good schools and good principals focus their programs on that as opposed to state standards, because a child that is getting at the top 2% of their state standards at a hood school is still not going to get the same opportunities in life and still going to have to know how to support themselves faster than a kid in a well-established neighborhood. So focusing on Common Core curriculum when there's a social and a racial divide is a fail of school districts, because we need to teach our kids how to get the advantage when the game is unfair. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it sure does. It's very eye-opening too, that really there hasn't been a lot of change, and that it's just kind of being, bird feeded in, like, well, we'll give them a little bit of specialty over here and a little bit of specialty over here. But by the time you're in 8th grade, you're really, as a teenager, over all the traditional education of more math, more science, more, and it needs to move into adulthood. How do we buy a home? How do we get married? How do we talk to a spouse? I feel like that is a prime opportunity to set our kids up for mental wellness from age, 14 to 18.
Yeah.
And that writing piece was really relevant that you said, because as a writer, you do get that creativity to express your emotion, and we have taken that away. So thank you for that answer. That was brilliant.
All right, so I'm gonna have Coach Nisha wants to pose a question to all of us.
So everything that we shared, I know it comes from our heart and things that we see. But what I want to ask is, what solutions do we have, and how are we going to create a blueprint moving forward?
I can answer that. Everybody don't answer at once. So look, from Eric's perspective, right? There is no quick fix. There is no standard right answer. There's no solution. There's nothing that we can just vividly answer the question without doing the work. I'm back to doing the work, right? Because when we do the work, that's when we realize what needs to be handled, what needs to be adjusted, we put a little more work in on this part, but just to sit back and talk about it, that's one thing. But to actually do the work, that's where the answer lies. So I'm gonna yield the mic because I know there's a few people that can answer the question, but the answer lies in doing the work.
And you are absolutely 100% right about doing the work, right? And so the thing that I see, this is me, I'm a sociologist. So I see everything from a macro perspective and at the macro level, and I break it down to the individual. Some people go the other direction. It's not how my mind works. But when I look at where we are, it's projected that the Black community will have zero net worth by 2053, right? That's 31 years from now. That's some people's lifetime, And so when we talk about education, we talk about, mental health and family structure and all these things, right? We have to get practical and radical about what we are doing going forward. So how are we as members of our own communities stepping up and saying, you know what, let's do this, right? Like for me, I am building a whole nonprofit based on my passion to see people heal, because the reality is we can't build anything or protect what we build if we do not have the proper mindset toward that, right? If my trauma is so profound that I'm going around, there's this, and I hate cliches. They say, if you don't heal, you bleed on people that didn't cut you. That's what we do to each other. We got a whole, and so we're hemorrhaging, as a community, because there's so much pain in our background. And someone said to me the other day, how do we get untethered from the past so that we can move forward? Because we keep dragging stuff that's already happened in the present. And that the fear of history repeating itself keeps us from doing anything, right? Oh, well, why can't we go build our own community? Oh, because they're going to burn it down. Oh, no, the hell they're not, because now we can bear arms, right? And so doing the work means start somewhere. Let's do something. So for me, the first step is setting up an infrastructure. I know it takes money, but the same money that we spend on stuff and status symbols, we need to reinvest. If the Black community, if Black people, the 10% of us that contribute to society, literally, if for a couple of months, just pulled our money out of that system and put it back into our own community, that system would not survive without us. And we have to realize the power that we have. And I think that that's where it starts, is acknowledging what Marianne Williamson said: our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, but that we are powerful beyond measure. That power that we have, when do we have to harness that power and start saying, you know what, no, let me not go buy this $80,000 car. You know what you can do with $80,000? In certain communities, like there is a county here in North Carolina where you can buy an acre of land for 4 G's. So I can take that $80,000 that I was going to spend on a car and buy 20 acres of land, right? And build something. even if it's just the wealth, because we understand that real estate land is an asset. So just have, some land, build a home for my family and I, maybe, start a farm and grow food, things like that. We don't do that. We don't come outside of the box of the keeping up. A lot of us are just keeping up with the Joneses. So for me, I think that we start at stop making excuses, because an excuse is just a lie looking for sympathy. That's all an excuse is. We have to come out of well, this is why we can't. No, until we start, we're going to always be behind. And I'm tired of watching like every other race of people, every other group, every other community kind of progress, and we're, instead of kind of taking, and I believe it was Brother Robert who had to leave way at the beginning of this discussion, said, pay attention to what other people do. The people that are basically winning and progressing, and let's start doing that, but we get back to we don't trust each other. And it's like rebuilding those bonds of trust and saying, you guys were saying, well, I don't know my neighbors. Man, I know everybody. I started just going, hey neighbor, I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, you never know what gold mine is right next door to you if you are too afraid to just go say hi and have a conversation with somebody. You don't know what skills they possess. You don't know what knowledge they possess. You don't know what they're willing to do until you stop being motivated by fear of what they might be, and understand that, everyone is not out to hurt you or and that's the trauma. That's a traumatized perspective that we live under. And I get it. Trust me, born and raised in the hood. But at a certain point, we have to say, you know what? There's no better time than now to start changing the way I perceive other people, and realizing that it literally just takes one person to start a whole movement. But if we're all too afraid to take the step, where are all our Black leaders? I just realized that when I was a kid, I saw all Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, all these people. And nowadays it's like we value all the entertainers and all of that. But we don't place value on the average Joe person who has a business that'll employ other people we don't highlight those people. And so we will be wrapping up in about 20 minutes. So what I wanted to do is just everybody give me one solution, 10, 15 seconds max, of where, or a place where you think we can start. Because this is recorded and I'm literally going to write this down and start building from there. So I'll go by order of hands that I see raised, or you can just put it in the chat. But if given the opportunity, like I said, to make a list of, okay, this is where we need to start based on where you live or what you see, what would be your solution? So I'll start with Lamia and work my way from my screen. I'll work my way right.
Thank you. I think the biggest thing that we need to do right now is to get involved past the point of convenience. And so when I say that, I mean, you gotta be an advocate past where it's just comfortable or where you have time for. I would like to see there be a Black parent organization in every public school in America.
Yes, I second that with Lamia. What I'm doing with the organizations that I'm working with is directly getting ready to go into these schools nationwide and talk about how to deal with these active violent incidents, talk about the disparities, and talk about how I want to get other Black men involved in touching every one of those young men, whatever they call themselves as far as their gender, like a Big Brother's reinvented. Because if we don't put hands on, wrapping our arms around them, getting rid of that emotional suppression that we were taught as boys ourselves, we're going to see more active violent incidents, and that's just going to create more havoc in our community. So that's what I'm working on. Those are the tip of the iceberg of the plans of actions that I'm doing. Help you out.
As I've always said before, and I want to continue to say that, too often we leave the education, we leave the education to the school. And I believe school is not the end, or it's not the destination of education, it's a continuation of the education. The education started at home. But here's a problem that we have in our community. And now that may be so in other communities, but we're talking about our community. And as you alluded to earlier, we're trying to keep up with the Joneses. We have houses that we barely spend time in. It's like a hotel. We come in, we eat, we take a shower, we go. Because we have to work overtime to pay for that big house. We have to have the latest car. So we live the education on TV or people in the hood. So it's got to start at home. So look no further for the hands out for somebody to come in and rescue us. Let's start at our home. So we're all here, we can do our part. We don't need, as a matter of fact, we don't need a collective people. Start at your own home. You want to be the leader in your own home. Lead at home. And I think that's where you need to start. We need to go back to that. And until we do, we're just cutting branches, but we got to get back to the roots. I'm Wood and I'm done speaking.
Yes, I agree with that, Will. Everything starts at home. We cannot leave especially for our children, we cannot leave the education systems to raise them when they go out of the house. You have to take initiative at home to start with your children. And this is for everything that we want to see, whether it's financial change, whether it's emotional or trauma healing. We have to find out these things, the rooted problems at home. And if we can't help our children or help ourselves or help individuals, we can go outside and get that necessary help. Another thing is we need to be the spiritual leader at home. What children see and what others see is what they will do. So if we can lead from that standpoint, because go back to where it was, God is in everything. If he is not the foundation, you're going to have a straw house. If you build a house on the sand, it's going to wash away. The man that builds his house on the rock, and the rock should be God, Jesus Christ. That should be your foundation. And then healing over time, as well as getting educated, having the mindset change. There are financial, at your fingertips, there's financial literacy. There is everything that you need right now in this time is at your fingertips. We don't need any excuses. We need to go out and not even go out of your home. You can stay on your, instead of going on social media, scrolling, we get trapped in it. I get trapped in it sometimes. You go on social media and you find one thing and you end up in 20 different things and an hour is gone by. So if we take that same initiative and find information and keep getting the information, but also applying that information, applying the necessary educating, the things that you have learned to take action in that. This is where transformation starts to happen. Once you take action and having the process go through, you can have change. So starting at home, I agree with Will. And we also just need to continue to educate ourselves, our children, the generation of communities and the things that need to grow them. We can't just leave them to the outside, to the politicians. We have to take up that reign. We have to stop relying on the handouts, because we're keeping ourselves and our generations to come in a poverty mindset. So let's start at home by doing what's necessary. The information is there. We don't have any more excuses. Now is the time for us to pick it up and to move forward. Educate, heal, and move on. I yield the mic.
To that, I'm gonna leave it with a quote. Last excuses.
Go ahead, EA.
Hear me? I said less solutions, less excuses and more solutions. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Less excuses, more solutions.
I'm always talking to my muted mic. There's no other hands raised. I'm looking in the chat. Oh, okay, Coach Nisha, I'm sorry. My bad.
I keep hearing we all say start at home, but when we start at home, I started at home, but I came from a very traumatic experience, and all I used to do when starting was to yell and think I was going to get my point across. So when we start at home, we have to work on healing ourselves first before we go on to the community to try to show others how to do it.
Oh my goodness, the party has just begun. She just invited us all to the party. Who said that? Was that Coach Mila or Coach Nisha? Was that Nisha? Oh, Nisha, you are tracking 1,000,000%. That's it right there. That's the start, guys.
So for me, I am 100%, it starts with healing. When we say it starts with healing, a lot of times people don't know what that means. It means identifying those things inside of you that are keeping you stuck, right? That are keeping you stagnant. They are hindering your growth. I want y'all to understand something. Trauma, unprocessed, unhealed trauma actually causes physical damage to your brain. It puts spots on your brain. And so when we sit and we don't go get help for whatever reason, we are in a time, it's 2022. You don't have to, there are alternatives to therapy. There's too much information out there. There's too many apps and, too many ways for you to heal and to cope and to grow, for you to stay, unless you just want to be in a state of perpetual victimhood. And this thing happened to me, and I'm going to carry that thing. That's my badge. And that's how I identify myself. So for me, the solution would be get help, right? It's okay to not be okay, but how long are you going to be okay with not being okay? How long are you going to be depressed knowing that you can get help? Medicaid exists if you can't afford insurance. And it's not even really that hard to get mental health treatment like it used to be. A lot of times people will say, oh, I don't have access to that. You can go on YouTube and find somebody. We look for everything else. And I've stated this before, a lot of people are willfully ignorant. And what I mean by that is they choose not to get the information because then they're accountable. And once you know, what do they say? When you know better, you do better. So if you want to do better, act like you know. A lot of us don't want to act like we know. It was a lot. I know a lot of our people on here's personal story. And I know that going through the process of healing was not easy. It wasn't. I know, my brother Will, myself, Coach Nisha, we've been through a lot, but we're still standing. So what do we do with what we're still standing? If we have the game, we give the game. which is why we're all coaches, because we want to pass along the knowledge and the experience that we've gained to help others. So, and that's what I'll say. Act like you know what I mean? That's going to be my new thing. Because it sometimes is almost sickening to just watch people wallow, and they want you to join their pity party. And I'm tired of complaining. I'm tired of not doing. I want us to start taking steps forward towards growth, healing, and progress. Because if not, like I said, by 2053, what are we going to be talking about? Like, for real. If you have children and you realize that by the time your children reach your age, the Black community is going to have a net worth of 0, that should scare you. And I don't mean, it should be that healthy fear that kind of motivates you to be like, you know what, let me go ahead and do something now. Because it starts with one person. You ever saw Forrest Gump, one of my favorite movies? Remember when he just started running? By the time he was done, there was people running with him. You know what I mean? And all he did was start running. So I'll be Forrest Gump and start running, but who's gonna join me on the run is the question. Because when I say I'm serious, watch me work. This is step 1. But please believe, in about 6 months, the momentum will have been picked up so much that, if you hadn't got on this train when it started, it ain't gonna be no way for you to get on unless you buy a ticket, because I'm trying to get my people out of here. It's too much to watch sometimes. So with that said, anyone else want to provide a solution or a place to start so that we can, when I say develop a blueprint, I'm actually going to write this stuff down. Don't think I'm not.
So
I see I got one hand raised. Do you want to speak, Brandon?
Yeah,
okay, go
let
ahead.
Galaxy 10 go first. Galaxy 10.
Yeah.
Galaxy 10, that's you in the black shirt. That's you in the black shirt with the beard.
Yeah.
You don't have a name. You just got Galaxy 10. But I see your hand was raised. You were trying to be acknowledged, but you got to raise your hand.
Okay. I will wait for you then. I will let you finish. Whoever has
That's
the hand.
Angel. I'm gonna let Angel.
Yes, Angel.
Because I got a couple of mics open.
Got you. I was trying to do like
okay, so I'm gonna go Angel,
emoji.
then
Yeah.
TJ, then Brandon.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. I was trying to do like the raise the hand emoji. I couldn't find it.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
You good? No. I couldn't even find the emoji, but yeah. So honestly, and I'm actually glad that this happened. Majority of the things that I would have said had already been said, even though I came in a little bit later. I say that I'm glad that that happened because that lets me know that I'm not the only one who thinks in that manner in regards to where we are as a community and what some of our solutions should be. So that also gives me a little bit comfort knowing that at least there's a few people out there who would already be on the same page as I am in regards to getting the ball rolling and getting our community in a better position than we currently are in. But nonetheless, I still wanted to contribute to this conversation. So, one of our solutions, and again, which has already been said, is starting individually, starting at home. And of course, the purpose wouldn't be to be a example for others to, I guess, like look at as a blueprint, is just for the simple fact that no matter what you start, people want to be a part of something, right? Gangs exist because people want to be a part of something, whether it be positive or negative, there's an organization out there that I would like to partake in. So let me express my interest in it, get my, get my feet wet and then contribute to that organization. So if it be me as an individual putting my ducks in a row, getting the ball rolling, and showing other individuals how cultivating relationships, starting families, taking care of home first, if you can show people how that is conducive to our purpose, then they'll say, hey, I like what they're doing. I'd like to join in on that. Or you may have somebody else who's already further along than you and seeing you putting in the work and say, this gentleman or this woman is putting in the work. And I know that either I personally can assist them in going further, or I know someone who can assist them in going further. People want to be a part of something. Sometimes they don't want to be the first, right? You know how like we come across all of these stories and then to say the first Black man to the first Black woman to, and sometimes people don't want to be first, but they do want to be a part. So again, start at home, whether it be by yourself, with a sibling, another relative, with your spouse. Start at home, build that foundation, and then, like I'm saying, like the good book says, build it and they will come. You don't need an army behind you. You don't need the army behind you. Just start, and they will come. And before you know it, like you said, in regards to the forest reference, when you start, they will just join in, and sometimes without your consent. I see you're doing something. I know I can help you, so here's an helping hand. I yield my mic.
Okay, TJ, did you want to speak? Because you're unmuted.
Yeah, I can say something.
Okay.
I can say something. Yeah. I can say hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello? Okay. Okay.
We got
Awesome.
you.
So all right, cool. So I think that it's just about when they say each one teach one. I think it's about, us sharing, people who have gone through different experiences, people who can relate, people who can identify. I feel like they need to share their stories more, like those stories need to get out. I feel like it's an information war. I think that, with the music and with the what we see on programming that we don't control consistently, like the messages and the words are of self-destruction. So we need to hear more information about how to live healthy, how to live whole, how to live a productive lifestyle, as opposed to the self-destructive lifestyle that they made so popular within our community. Thinking that that's the way to go, and they're only ruining their lives going against people that look like them. They're not even taking the time out to understand where the real issues or struggles come from.
You
and
froze,
addressing
TJ.
that, even though I understand that sometimes you're in certain situations where, you're not even in that capacity. Like if you're worried about where to eat some food, or if you're worried about you have drama in your household, things of that nature, your parents on drugs, et cetera, like you don't even have time to think about that. But I think it's an information war. I think that when you have the right information, you produce certain energy. When you have the bad information and it's overwhelming, then you produce that energy. So I think it's just about kind of like what you're doing right now, what we're all saying, what we're all doing, which is trying to do our part and share and give if it moves you in that way. I yield my mic.
And when I went into the bathroom, I felt that all my hair was cut off. Can everybody hear me? All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, how you guys doing? Thank you for inviting me to this call. It's kind of unexpected, but I do like the things you guys are all saying. So, speaking on the net worth of our people in 2053, the thing I started with my daughter, we open up her, what kind of account do we open your daughter? I can't remember. We opened up her college, or 529, that's what we did. But also, I think a lot of things that people could do, because you can start an investment plan, mutual fund, Upmore UGMA account for our children for $25. And I think a lot of people can afford that. So one thing I've done with her now also, I got her a bank account open, and I put $25 from each check. One goes for her investment account, one goes for her personal account. I got her ATM card, and I'm teaching her how to budget her money out, spend so much here and there. And if you guys could maybe implement a program like that, I think that would do a lot of good. Because a lot of the problem with us is we buy what we see and never what we're taught. So no one's teaching us to buy or to start college funds or open up UGMAs or UGMAs for children, and get investing early, because truth be told, a $25 investment over the course of 40 years will give somebody almost $100,000 with the right investment. And it doesn't take much. And if we teach the children young the importance of compounding interest and investing, it doesn't have to stay 25. Once they get a job as a teenager, they can invest more. Once they become adults, they invest more. But from the ages of 20 to 30, if you invest $10,000, or over that course, if you're investing $10,000 or back $200 a month over the course of that 10 years, you really don't have to even invest anymore. You'll be pretty good at retirement age. That's today's dollar. So I think it's just really a matter of starting young and teaching the right concepts to our children. I yield the mic. Thank you.
I believe EA wants. I'm always talking to my muted mic. I believe EA wanted to speak.
Okay. I was just going for me, I was going to end it with, I've heard a lot of great information today. I've met some great people. I've heard, some people I knew already. And like we said, we've all mentioned, like, the work has to be done. And it sounds like a lot of us do the work. And part of doing the work is connecting the dots, right? So I'm a mental health and substance abuse counselor. I'm licensed. I'm out of the state of Oregon, but I do have also some ties to Dallas and Atlanta, and I do a lot of work in those markets. I'm looking to work in every market because the work is never done. It'll still be being done when I'm dead and gone. So that's how much work I'm ready to do, and I'm ready to pull up and do the work. So I put my 10K information, which is my digital business card, in the chat. Please, please, please contact me only if you're ready to work. I don't have time to do a lot of the conversation because we did the conversation today. I understand where we at, and we all understand where we at. So when you ready to work, my 10K information in the chat. Please contact me. Let's work. Let's go.
Okay, EA, I appreciate that. I said I have a nonprofit. It's called Love Overcomes Trauma. It is being it's in its infancy. So digital currency is free, right? It doesn't cost any money to share a person's post. It doesn't cost any money to, come onto a platform like this or to promote someone and what they're doing. Because I feel like when we share digital currency, we do more for each other, especially when we think about everything that we're bombarded with and everything that we're shown that's not positive. And then you have that one person that stand out, like my brother TJ. I met him on Instagram. I love his content. So when he posts stuff that I like, I'm going to share it. I'm going to like it. And that's how we get the proper messages in front of people, right? Unity. We can't build anything. The Bible says when the people are one, nothing they imagine to do can be restrained from them. And you do not have to be a Christian to be unified with someone. And I think that that's the failure that we make as a community, as we allow things that were created to separate us to actually continue to separate us, and don't pay attention to the fact that most things are intentional. So we have to stop allowing ourselves to be destroyed by the lack of knowledge, the lack of unity, the lack of love, and the lack of trust. Those bonds of brotherhood where men would put their life on the line, for men like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, those need to be restored. You should never look at your brother, another Black man, and see him as your enemy. He should always be your brother, no matter what condition his life is in. That's how we encourage each other to do better. When a person feels seen for who they are, how they are, where they are, they're empowered to do better. They are. But we have to stop competing with each other. I don't see Coach Nisha as my competition. I don't see Lamia as my competition, or any other woman. Those are my sisters. We have to, go back to the "we shall overcome" kumbaya time, where we could really come together and do something other than protest. Because what did protesting for the last 10 years get us other than a federal holiday? We are still without a federal hate crime law on the books. Those are the things that we need to pay attention to. We still have the lowest rate of attainment of generational wealth, the lowest rate of home ownership. Those are the things that we need to be concerning ourselves with, and not, Will Smith slapping the, bejesus out of Chris Rock on the Oscars. That narrative created a whole nother situation, because that's the stuff we put our energy into. So, a lot of you guys missed what Brother Robert talked about moving in silence. And what does that mean? That if you go to a restaurant that is a non-Black owned establishment and you don't get treated right, why do we need to broadcast that? All you do is bring attention to them, and they get more business, instead of letting everybody, everybody in your circle, in your network, hey, don't go there. They don't treat people right. Finding another one that we can support and encouraging them. We'll go to a Black owned business, and the moment somebody get an attitude, oh, don't go there, they got bad service, instead of finding a way to help them do better. We don't do that. We don't support each other in a way that's encouraging. We have to blast each other. We have to, verbally assault people, and that mentality needs to change. We are not the enemy. The infighting, we got to stop it. It has to stop now, because if it doesn't, we're going to continue to be destroyed from the inside out, until we can look at ourselves and say, hey, we need to fix this. We're going to continue to have the same issues, and same things are going to be perpetuated, same cycles. And, at some point, the cycles have to end. And, raise your hand if you consider yourself a cycle breaker. Because if you are a cycle breaker, then you need to start breaking the cycles. Do better. And encourage everybody around you to do better. And that's really what it is. At this point, it's last call for solutions, last call for comments, because we've been on here for 3 hours. And I want to say this one thing. This was birthed out of me watching what happened in Buffalo, and it broke my heart. And we didn't get to a lot of things, but please know that this is not the last discussion. I got another one coming up, and another one after that. I already have. And so just look for the opportunity to help build this blueprint, because when my nonprofit is established, everything that we're talking about is going to be what we're addressing. And we have to join together. So if I support you and you support me, we can get this ball rolling and get from where we are. And we'll look back a year from now and see how much progress we've made together, even if it's just the 18 people that are here. Like I said, it only takes one person to start a movement. I'm going to let Shanique go, and then EA, and then we'll close out.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this, Coach Miller. I joined a little bit late, but I really enjoyed the conversation I had. And I think the only thing that I can add is value when we come together and we talk about, unity and anything that's going to elevate the community, the collective, is making sure there's accountability and action plans. Because it's great to have conversations and really brainstorm and think things through. But if there's no action plans with dates and follow-ups and keeping each other accountable, then we're wasting each other's time. There has to be action after the words, after the discussions, after the ideas are, thought out. It's like, now it's time for action. Because as we look around what's happening in the world, in all different places of the world, we can't waste time. And I'll leave it at that. And thank you for this space.
Oh, she just dunked it for me. She dunked it for me, because that's exactly where I was going. Definitely, we got to get to work. Okay, we got to definitely, what I'm saying? Thanks everybody for being here. If I'm the final word, I want to definitely thank everybody for being here. Make sure everybody should be following each other. We should have put all of our information in the chat. If you need it live, let me know. We can do it like that too. But the goal is to support each other. We're building a community. We're building a network. A lot of us met on Clubhouse, and that's another way that we are consistent. I see a lot of these people every day in various ways in various rooms. So that's the way that we can start now. Like the last lady just said, she said dates and action plan. That's a date and action plan. You can see, you can definitely find me on Clubhouse every day. I'm in Loyalty and Friends, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. That's one room that I'm standardized. I have my own room, analyze this topic. I'm there every Monday, 6 p.m. in the West Coast time. So there's ways that we can do this, and we got to do it now. Okay. Happy Saturday. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers in the building. Definitely. And even if you're not a father, you're a father of the community when you're doing the work. Okay. So happy Father's Day, even to you mothers, for happy Father's Day as well. You understand? So I'm going to give you guys y'all Saturday back. I'm on a self-care mission. I had a 12 o'clock appointment, and I definitely want to honor that. You know what I'm saying? And yes, peace and blessings.
Everybody, give me 1 second. All right, super quickly. We're all about dates and stuff and timeliness and holding each other accountable. If everybody
We can't hear you.
Cool. You can't hear me at all?
No, I can hear him. I can hear you.
How about now? You hear me now? Hello. Yes? Okay, super quickly. If everyone here is about dates and holding ourselves accountable and following through and action as opposed to anything else, then just with a show of hands, if everyone's cool with coming back to the table at some point or getting an email or something with, this is the plan, we're going to have X person do X thing. And if they're cool with it, fine. If not, there's a reason why, no problem. There's no pressure on people to do X, Y, or Z thing. But if something's in someone's wheelhouse, I view this more as a collective. In other words, I have my lane of genius. Everyone has their lanes of genius. And if we can work together in that way, that is how I envision it. I could be wrong. So I'm just throwing out my 2 cents in the sense of not just dates and times and everything else, but also in the sense of getting things done, allowing each person in their area of genius to get things done along those lines. So I would suggest everyone, if you haven't, or if Coach Mila doesn't have your information, DM her. She would be the centralized person, in my humble opinion. And then from there, we divvy things out. We discuss things. We have another meeting like this, and everyone just goes through each piece, so we all know the entire puzzle or the entire slices of the pizza pie, and then each person's pie in that pizza pie. If that makes any sense. Hopefully it does. Thanks.
Will, before you go, talk about what we're doing on the 27th, brother.
Okay, no problem.
Before.
Absolutely. 10 more seconds. So there's two things that I'm helping to organize, and it's not just me, it's others with me. There's Men ESN and there's Quilting Power. Men ESN is the Men Empowerment Support Network. And some of the issues we've discussed today are some of the reasons why I created Men ESN and Quilting Power. Temple is part of Quilting Power. EA and LP and others are part of Men ESN. And what it is it's not just one or two people who run a support group. It's 6 people, but it's dynamic, and that as more members exist, there'll be more and more professionals who are part of the professional group that help run the group, because trauma support isn't just linear, it's not focused. There's different needs for different people at different times in that journey throughout one's entire life. And so it's also addressing geography issues. It's addressing, what's the word I'm looking for? Wait lists, waiting lists issues, and all those other pieces. And it's through a Facebook group. So there's 24/7 access and connection to the professionals, but also those who are in the group can help each other out as well. So there's that extra dynamic piece there too. It costs nothing to join. Eventually, maybe there might be a $1, $2 charge, whatever, some admin fee charge, but nothing crazy. The whole point of it is support. It's not making money. Okay, so you can talk to me, EA, LP, Temple, others. But again, on the 27th of June, the men are having their summit where they're going to be discussing men's issues. There'll be 10 speakers, and the women are on Tuesday, June 28th. So Monday, June 27th, Tuesday, June 28th, and it starts at noon Eastern both days, 9 Pacific, 10 minutes per speaker, plus a panel at the end. And then other stuff possibly after that. But right now, the main structure is 10 minutes per speaker and a panel of discussion at the end. Thank you for letting me speak. I appreciate it.
Damn, that was a hell of a 10 seconds. I love you, Will.
Okay, before we close out, again, I want to thank you all for coming. I really, honestly, Brother TJ, T Motivation, I really, really appreciate you coming in here. I have an incredible amount of respect for you. A lot of your content has encouraged me. I just wanted to tell you that, give you your flowers, as they say. But I did put my link tree in the chat. A lot of people have put their 10K card and all their contact information. I am Trauma Coach Mila. I'm a trauma recovery coach. I'm also a speaker. And I'm also an author. I've written a book and I'm working on 2 more. But I said all that to say, we're going to stay connected. My next chat or discussion is going to be the first week of July. I think I'm going to do July 1st. I haven't set the actual date, but the title is The Mirror Has Two Faces. The man you are and the man you see. Which one is real? And that's for men. And then I'm going to do one for women called The Best of Both Girls. And this is about healing. And so just stay tuned. I'm always have a landing page and an opportunity for people to register. And I'm also building a webinar called The Way We View Trauma is All Wrong. And that one is not free because it's taken a lot of time to study and to learn and to become an expert in trauma and trauma recovery. But it is Juneteenth, and I know we all have our various things to do. I'm headed to a festival downtown with my children. And again, thank you so much for everyone that joined, commented, that spoke. It was a wonderful experience for me. And I thank you for the support. And so with that being said, I want everyone to have a wonderful rest of your day. And well, we're gonna go ahead and close out. This was live on YouTube, so anybody who didn't catch the whole thing can go back and watch it later. And if you need that information, you can hit my link tree and DM me on any of my social media platforms. And I would like to say happy Father's Day to all the fathers, father figures, and, you know, even the men who want to be fathers. Happy Father's Day to you, because you have that mentality about being a good father now, so that when you do have a child, you'll be ahead of the game. So everyone have a great day. And I'm going to count down from 5, and I'm going to go ahead and close the discussion out. So we'll be closing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.